right, welcome back. Let's just go ahead and go right into it. Let's look at the appendicular muscles. So these are going to be the muscles that position and stabilize the pectoral and the pelvic girdles. They also move the upper and lower limbs. And we can divide appendicular muscles into two groups. Muscles that move the shoulders and the upper limbs, right here, and muscles that muscles of the pelvis and move the lower limbs. Okay. Let's start with the shoulder and the upper limbs. We've got four groups of these. Okay. We've got muscles that position the pelvic girdle, muscles that move the arm, the whole arm, muscles that move the forearm and the hand, and then muscles that move the fingers. And so basically we're just moving our way down. Okay. We'll start with the muscles that position the pectoral girdle. One of the major ones is a very large flat muscle in your back known as the trapezius. Wrong one. There we go. It's large and superficial. So if you press down back here in the back, you can kind of see right there is my trapezius muscle. Okay. It extends to the base of the skull. So if you've ever gotten tightness in your shoulders and you feel it creeping up and you start getting a tension headache in the back of your head, that's that trapezius muscle. It originates on the midline of the neck and back, right back here. And it inserts into the clavicle, on the clavicle and the scapular spines, those edges of the scapula in your back. We've got the muscles that move the arm. Now, again, and I said this in the last one, these are not all of the muscles that move the pelvic girdle and the shoulder and the arm and stuff like that. We're just focusing on the ones on that study guide, okay? Some of y'all, based on the different joint that you're researching, you will be learning a whole lot more muscles. Like if you're doing ball and socket of the shoulder, there's a whole lot more going on here. There's an entire muscle group where we're skipping all the ones that control the hands. They weren't on the study guide. If you're doing those joints in the wrist or the hand, you're going to learn those joints, okay? But not everybody has to. Everybody is responsible for what's on the study guide. Disclaimer over. All right, muscles that move the arms. The first one that we're going to talk about is the deltoid, which is this shoulder muscle right here. That's the major abductor that's going to bring your arm up like this, right away from the midline. And then the supraspinatus, which is in here. I don't know if you can see it from in here. I think it's that one. And that assists the deltoid in moving your arm. And when you raise your arm up, you can see. So if you go to the gym and you do the exercises where you're going like this and you're flapping like a bird, that's the deltoid. Then we have the pectoralis major, which is a very large muscle right here in between the anterior chest and the greater tubercle of the humerus over deep in here, which produces flexion at the shoulder joint. We have the latissimus dorsi, which is a very large flat muscle in your lower back between your thoracic vertebrae and your humerus up in here, which produces extension at the shoulder joint. The muscles that move the forearm and the hand, most of these originate on the humerus and insert on the forearm or wrist. The exceptions are the major flexor, which is the biceps brachii, and the major extensor, which is the triceps brachii. Biceps brachii and the long head of the triceps both originate on the scapula. Okay. The major extensors that move the forearm and the hand are mainly posterior, on the posterior and lateral surfaces of the arm, and the flexors are on the anterior and the medial surfaces. And so breaking this down, your extensors are on the posterior and lateral surfaces, so they're right here. Flexors are going to be right here. Okay. Extensors of the elbow include the triceps brachii, which are these muscles back here. The long head originates on the scapula, and it inserts on the olecranon of the ulna, so it's in here. And then the anconeus, which is a muscle that assists in this movement. All right, the muscles responsible for the flexion of the elbow include the biceps brachii, which is this muscle right here. It flexes the elbow and also supinates the forearm, so goes like this. It stabilizes the shoulder joint, originates on the scapula, and it inserts on the radial tuberosity of the radius, so like right here. Okay. Then we also have the brachialis and the brachioradialis, and those also help in flexing the elbow. And those are two deeper muscles, slightly smaller, down over here. So here's the brachioradialis, and here is the brachialis. Moving now, keeping in mind also we're skipping all of these muscles. They're not on the study guide. All right in here into the extrinsic muscles of the hands, the intrinsic muscles of the hands, and on this side as well, plus all the tendons that are right here. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Those muscles still all exist. We're just not directly studying them. Okay, then we have the muscles of the pelvis and the lower limbs, which include, so the pelvic girdle is tightly bound to the skeleton, so there's not a whole lot of movement that takes place there. There's very few axial muscles that influence the position of the pelvis. There's also a range of movement that's possible with the lower limbs, and those are all appendicular muscles. The muscles that position the lower limbs are in three functional groups, including the muscles that move the thigh, the muscle that move the leg, and the muscle that moves the foot and the toes. So let me back up. I just want to kind of point out something up with this part right here. When we did the skeleton, right, the actual pelvic girdle itself, because of the joints and everything like that, it's to a certain extent part of the axial skeleton. It's not, okay? It is an appendicular structure. However, those are much more tightly bound together than the bones of the pectoral girdle, okay? And so because of how the bones are stitched together, the pelvic girdle doesn't move. And you don't want it to, because that's where the main foundational support of your weight occurs. And so all the movement is going to happen at the hips with the humerus moving with those hip muscles. Okay, and whereas you have a whole lot more musculature going on up at the pectoral girdle, holding all those pieces together. So I just wanted to sort of clarify that part a little bit. So let's look at some of the actual muscles real quick. The muscles that move the thigh include the gluteal muscles, the lateral rotators, the adductors, and the iliopsoases. The iliopsoas. Starting with the glutes, the gluteal muscles, the glutes, right? So these are the muscles that are basically going to make up your behind, okay? We've got the gluteus maximus. That's the big one that sort of makes the shape of the behind. It's the largest and most posterior gluteal muscle, and it produces extension and lateral rotation of the hip. Deeper to those, inside, so deeper underneath the gluteus maximus is the gluteus medius, which is this one right here, kind of in between medius, like medial, it's going in between. And then the gluteus minimus is the smallest of this particular group. They originate anterior to the gluteus maximus, and they insert on the greater trochanter of the femur, so you can see that spot right here. And you can see the gluteus maximus is inserting on a different part of the femur. The tensor fasciae latae, which is this side muscle right here on the lateralmost part of your hip, works with the gluteus maximus, and it pulls on the iliotibial tract of the lateral surface of the thigh. And so it helps with the extension of the hip and the rotation. Okay. We've got adductor muscles. We have several with these. And so this is another one you just need to know about the adductor group. Okay, you don't necessarily need to know the individual muscles of the adductor group. You just need to know about the adductor group. So the pectineus, the brevis, the longus, and the gracilis do hip flexion. So let me clear this out just a little bit. So all of these do hip flexion. And the adductor magnus, which is this bigger muscle, all of this right here, is responsible for adduction and flexion, and also medial or lateral rotation at the hip. And so, nope, that's it. The iliopsis, oh, too far. There we go. Let's come back up here. So the iliopsis group, that's another one as far as we need to know the group. There's two major muscles. There's two hip flexors, the psoas major and the iliacus, and those are both going to be responsible for flexion at the hip. Other appendicular muscles, the muscles that move the leg, include flexors of the knee. Most of these originate on the edge of the pelvis, and they insert on the tibia or the fibula. The knee extensors are going to originate on the shaft of the femur and insert on the patella. The muscles that we need to know about this one are so starting off with the flexors, we have the hamstring group. The hamstring group are the biceps femoris and the semitendinosus and the semimembranosus. So let's look at these real quick. We've got the biceps femoris, which is this muscle right here. You can't see that. Let's try that again. So here's the biceps femoris. That's responsible for extending out your leg like this. Same thing with the semitendinous and the semimembranous. We also have the sartorius. Do I have a good shot of that one? I do in the next slide. So the sartorius, you remember that one from the last video? It's going to wrap around like this. And that's responsible for the rotation for the cross-legged part. Knee extensors, so these are ones that are going to extend the knee, like when you're standing up, for example. The main one we want to talk about with that one is the quadriceps femoris, which is 3 vastus muscles. Here labeled we have the vastus lateralis and the vastus medius, and the rectus femoris right here. Moving on, keep on going down. Now we're going to extend the foot and the toes. Extrinsic muscles. So these are muscles that are outside of the foot that help move it, include the gastrocnemius, which is your calf muscle, back here in the back. Okay, so if you just go inferior to your knee and grab the meaty part of your calf, that is your gastrocnemius. We also have the soleus. Let me see if I can find that one on here, which is a muscle that's underneath the gastrocnemius. So here it is right there. The fibularis muscles, which are the fibularis longus and the fibularis brevis, which are beneath those. And then the tibialis posterior, which is higher up. It's closer to the knee than some of the other muscles. And most of these muscles, primarily the gastrocnemius and the soleus, share the calcaneal tendon, which is this one right here. And you can see here's part of that tendon, and it sort of comes together right in there. This is known as the Achilles tendon. shared by the gastrocnemius and the soleus. Intrinsic muscles that produce flexion at the ankle is the tibialis anterior, which I think I mentioned. Nope, I did mention the posterior. So this will produce flexion of the ankle. Yep, that's it. And that opposes the gastrocnemius. So the gastrocnemius is going to try to extend the foot. The tibialis anterior is going to be the one that if you try to stand up, you stand up, right? You lift up your toes. Okay, you lift up your feet so you're just standing on your heels and you're walking awkwardly on your heels. That's the tibialis anterior. Okay, so effects of exercise and, specifically what that does with the muscular system and how it interacts with other systems. We know that exercise builds muscles. We looked at that a couple of videos ago. The muscular system, you're not only strengthening your muscles, you're strengthening other systems. For example, the cardiovascular system, the more you exercise, the more you're able to deliver oxygen and nutrients and remove carbon dioxide. The respiratory system is going to respond to oxygen demands of your muscles. The integumentary system is going to distribute heat for muscle activity. You're going to sweat. And the nervous system and the endocrine system is going to determine and direct muscular responses. To kind of close things out a little bit, here's a diagram that we have showing how the muscle system is going to interact with the other organ systems that we've talked about. So for example, the muscular system is going to provide support. It's similarly to the skeletal system. Your joints are all going to move because muscles are acting on and anchored to different bones. The integumentary system, there is synthesis of vitamin D for calcium and phosphate absorption. It's going to protect muscles underneath it. And so one of the things we're going to see as we go through is this diagram right here. We're going to be building on this more and more and more as we talk about these different systems. And so by the time we get to the end, pretty much to the end, we'll see how all of these systems are interconnected with each other. That, I think, is going to do it for the appendicular muscular system as well as the muscle system in general. Just like in the last one, if you miss anything, if you need to go back and get some stuff off of that study guide so you know the locations, go ahead and do that. Now, one of the things you'll have to be able to do on the test is identify, I'm going to give you a picture, I'm going to say, identify the structure labeled A, and I'm going to point to a muscle. Okay, and so you need to be able to identify what these muscles are on site, also their origins, their insertions, their movement, etc. So make sure you have all that information down when you're writing down the information on the muscles. Okay, you also have movement, origin, insertion. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. Ask me in class, send me a remind message, send me an email. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing y'all again soon.